Sun City. The divine pillar collapsed and the city walls shattered. Beneath the star-filled sky, countless divine shadows flickered between heaven and earth, and the violent collision of divine power resembled burning comets, filling every corner of Sun City. In this battlefield of cataclysm, a Taoist held a golden flower, leisurely walking through the air. All attacks and residual divine power around him could not touch his body. He stood there, yet it felt as if he were in another world. Primordial heavenly venerable. The shadow atop the sun pillar glared fiercely at the Taoist in the air, speaking with anger. Do the gods of Great Xia truly wish to destroy my Sun City? You Egyptian gods sought to destroy the foundation of Great Xia first. This time I shall shatter the essence of your Sun City. What is wrong with that? The primordial heavenly venerable replied calmly, golden flowers blooming from the void around him. 800 years ago your Egyptian gods crazily sacrificed all your citizens. Now your divine nation is without people, your national fortune depleted, merely surviving. My heavenly court's actions can be seen as fulfilling the will of heaven. As the primordial heavenly venerable's words fell, thousands of golden flowers spun in the air, and formless Tao rhythm flowed from the blooming flowers, connecting to the national fortune of Sun City. With each flower that wilted, Sun City would tremble violently. Seeing this, the shadow atop the sun pillar flashed with boundless fury. He raised his palm and heavily struck down on the divine pillar beneath him. Boom! A thunderous roar erupted, and the surface of the divine pillar instantly cracked with dense fissures. When the second palm struck down, the entire pillar exploded into fragments. Amidst the flying debris, a blazing sun radiating endless white divine light rose slowly from the remnants of the pillar. Initially, this sun was only 100 meters wide, but as it gradually ascended, its size began to expand rapidly. By the time it reached the highest point of Sun City, it had transformed into a blazing sun with a radius of several kilometers, its scorching divine light scattering into every corner of Sun City, emitting a destructive heat and light that even gods would find painfully blinding if they looked up at it. Endless divine might mixed with the blinding sunlight, filling every corner of the starry sky. With the emergence of this blazing sun, the star formation trembled slightly from the heat. This blazing sun was the supreme deity of Egyptian Sun City, the sun god Ra. Finally revealing your true form. The primordial heavenly venerable raised his head, his calm eyes staring directly at the blazing sun. At the same time, the golden flowers around him continued to wilt, transforming into countless fragments that dissipated in the air. The primordial heavenly venerable frowned slightly and looked down. He saw countless ancient bricks automatically shattering in the sun's square beneath the 9 broken divine pillars, as a miniature version of a green blazing sun rose from the deepest part of Sun City. Though this green blazing sun was countless times smaller than the white blazing sun, the aura it emitted was even more terrifying than that of Ra himself. The moment it appeared, the temperature of the entire battlefield began to rise at an astonishing rate. Are you trying to actively draw out the essence of Sun City to suppress us? The primordial heavenly venerable shook his head, raised his hand and pointed towards the towering heavenly court in the sky. A golden thread floated out from the center of the heavenly court, like a serpent, gliding through the battlefield and landing on the tip of the primordial heavenly venerable's finger. This golden thread intertwined in a mysterious trajectory at his fingertip, sometimes transforming into complex runes, sometimes into swirling multiple rings. Though it was only the size of a ping-pong ball, it emitted an aura even more terrifying than that of the green blazing sun. This golden thread was the essence of the heavenly court that the primordial heavenly venerable had severed from the high heaven. With the golden thread wrapped around his fingertip, the primordial heavenly venerable stepped forward into the air, directly arriving before the 2 blazing suns shining in the sky, crashing into the endless divine light. The 2 supreme deities, carrying the essence of their respective divine nations, clashed continuously. In the next moment, the divine power across the entire battlefield surged and boiled. Boom! In the battlefield of Sun City, a heavenly seal fell like a giant peak, crashing heavily onto the ground. Endless dust rose, and the edge of Sun City was directly smashed open by this falling giant peak, causing several divine shadows to spurt blood and fall at the shattered city wall's edge. The wind god Xiao gritted his teeth, unsteadily rising from the ground, his eyes fixed on the swirling dust before him. The giant peak transformed into a palm-sized treasure seal, flying into the thick smoke. Several figures emerged from within, holding various magical treasures, calmly gazing at the severely injured pillar gods before them. "Give up resistance," Guang Qingzi, dressed in a red robe, said while holding the heavenly seal, speaking lightly. "The battle of supreme deities is not so easily decided, especially with the essence involved. Now your Egyptian 9 pillar gods are down to just 5, while all 12 golden immortals of Great Xia are present. Even if your 8 primordial gods of Sun City and other divine methods are fully unleashed, they are no match for the gods of Great Xia. Moreover, with this great formation, Sun City has no chance of victory. By the time the battle of supreme deities concludes, your Egyptian gods and Sun City will have perished completely." Upon hearing this, the wind god Xiao's expression grew increasingly grim. He looked up at the continuously rumbling battlefield of supreme deities and then glanced around at the ravaged Sun City, a hint of madness creeping into his eyes. "Give up." As ancient gods, how could my Egyptian gods kneel before Great Xia? The war of divine nations is a matter of life and death. If you wish to destroy my Sun City, the gods of Great Xia must pay a price. I want to see how Great Xia, severely weakened after forcibly fighting to the death for my Sun City, will withstand the attacks of the other divine nations. A fierce whirlwind gathered around Xiao, and his eyes sparkled with unprecedented madness and ferocity. Guang Qingzi's eyes narrowed slightly, and his expression gradually became serious. He understood very well that the most challenging part of this war of divine nations was just beginning. The Egyptian gods, driven to a dead end, were like ferocious beasts on the brink of death, about to unleash a reckless counterattack without regard for the consequences. Even though their numbers had drastically decreased, the threat they posed had multiplied several times. Just as the Egyptian gods were about to disregard everything and charge at the gods of Great Xia, a thunderous roar erupted. A large gap was suddenly torn open in the star formation behind several pillar gods and the 8 primordial gods. A dark golden spear extinguished the stars in the sky. As the formation was torn open, the blurred figure holding the spear swayed and vanished into thin air, leaving only grayish-white mist silently swirling outside the gap. The Egyptian gods, who were ready to fight to the death, were momentarily stunned. The gods of Great Xia also paused for a moment, and then, as if realizing something, their expressions changed drastically. Coincidentally or not, the direction of the gap in the formation was directly facing Great Xia. The purpose of this grand formation was to seal off the Sun City, preventing any Egyptian deities from escaping amidst the chaos of the divine war. The gods of the Great Xia had worked together to set up this formation in the mist for 10 days, and even the supreme gods would find it difficult to break through from the inside. Although the external defenses were relatively weak, it was certainly not something that just anyone could breach. Since this person outside was able to forcibly tear open a corner of the formation, they were either extremely powerful or wielding some kind of artifact with special powers. The most critical point was whether that person acted with intent. The direction of the breach in the formation was precisely aimed at the Great Xia. It should be noted that aside from a few deities, the gods of the Great Xia had already left their posts to encircle and attack the Sun City. The current Great Xia could almost be considered an unguarded empty nest. Moreover, the timing of this person's breach was particularly cunning, coinciding perfectly with the moment when the Egyptian gods were trapped in a desperate situation, preparing to perish alongside the Great Xia. For this group of desperate, crazed, dying beasts, the sudden opening in their sealed cage pointed directly towards their unguarded enemy's lair. What would happen next was already self-evident. "Hold that breach." The Jade Ding real man immediately reacted, channeling divine power into his voice, which boomed like thunder in the air. All the Great Xia gods near the breach immediately dropped their battles and rushed towards it. However, the person who had opened the breach outside had chosen their position with such precision that the breach was located right behind the clustered Egyptian gods, and within a short distance, not a single Great Xia god was present. A few pillar gods glanced at the rolling mist behind them, their eyes first showing surprise, then endless madness and malice. They certainly knew that the person outside who helped them breach the formation had ulterior motives. Otherwise, after breaking the formation, They would not have immediately concealed themselves but would have stepped forward to help them confront the great Xia gods. This action clearly indicated that they intended to use them as pawns. But so what? Now that the Sun City was nearly destroyed, remaining here under the full assault of the great Xia gods left them with no way out. Since they had been pushed to this point, they had no other choice. This breach opened from the outside undoubtedly provided them with a new possibility. Charge out! The wind god Xiao shouted, and the remaining pillar gods along with the nearby 8 elemental gods, all surged towards the breach at an astonishing speed. The Jade Ding Real Man and several other golden immortals followed closely behind, but by the time they arrived at least 7 or 8 Egyptian gods had already rushed out, while the remaining 8 elemental gods and the surviving Egyptian gods were forcibly blocked at the breach. The aftermath of the clash between 2 supreme gods erupted in the air, and a golden thread swept across the sky, causing the surface of the azure blazing sun to suddenly show dense cracks. At that moment, all the Egyptian gods felt a sudden tremor in their divine essence. The source of the Sun City was damaged. The source of the Sun City, like the source of the Great Xia Heavenly Court, was the foundation of the Egyptian gods. The damage to the source of the Sun City meant that the foundation of the Egyptian gods was shaken, which indicated that even if they survived this calamity, they would gradually fall from divinity. Without the Sun City and falling from divinity, their best outcome might be to die quietly in the mist. If we are to die, we will take them down with us. The few 8 elemental gods blocked at the breach saw the great Xia gods rushing towards them, wanting to break through the breach and intercept those flying towards the great Xia, and a resolute malice appeared in their eyes. They raised their hands, lightly forming a seal in the air, and their divine power surged. The pursuing great Xia god's pupils suddenly constricted. Boom! A deafening explosion erupted, and the few gods blocked at the breach simultaneously exploded, their terrifying divine power rapidly converging at that point, then spreading out like a detonating nuclear bomb. At that moment, the light erupting from the breach was nearly comparable to the 2 burning suns in the sky. The pursuing great Xia gods were forced to take a few steps back, their faces dark with anger. These madmen! Guang Qingzi raised his palm, using the Fantian seal to gradually suppress the terrifying divine power from the self-detonation, his face showing urgency. The few Egyptian gods that got away are heading towards the Great Xia. That direction is the western border of the Great Xia? Right now, only the Queen Mother and Jiangxia are stationed in the Great Xia. Jiangxia is still in the capital. Can the Queen Mother alone stop so many desperate Egyptian gods? The Jade Ding Real Man furrowed his brow tightly, and after a moment he spoke. Don't panic too much. Even without us, the Great Xia is not that weak. In any case, we need to find a way to suppress the fluctuations from this divine power explosion and quickly send a portion of the faster gods through the breach to pursue them. We must remain here. Nearly 1/5 of the Egyptian gods have escaped, and the rest must be completely eradicated. None can be spared. Understood. Amidst the surging explosion of divine power, 4 pillar gods and 4 elemental gods charged out of the breach and plunged into the mist. The goddess of life, Isis, glanced back at the breach as if sensing something. She extended her hand and gently placed it on her chest. The source of the Sun City has shattered. We have no way out now. The wind god Xiao narrowed his eyes, his gaze fixed on the direction of the Great Xia, his eyes flickering with light. The Great Xia gods want to annihilate our Egyptian pantheon. Even if we die, we must tear a piece of flesh from them. But we don't know if there are any gods stationed in the Great Xia. The rain god Tefnut frowned and said, moreover, those Great Xia gods will catch up soon, and given the vast land of the Great Xia, if we split up to kill, we might only be able to take down 1 or 2 billion people. Right now, the Great Xia only has the West Queen Mother stationed. A voice floated down from above, causing the many Egyptian gods present to jump in their hearts and look up sharply. They saw a figure draped in a black robe holding a dark red spear smiling down at them. Loki, the goddess of life, Isis, narrowed her eyes. You were the one who broke the formation from the outside. Did you come alone? Where are the reinforcements from Asgard? Loki's smile grew even brighter. He did not answer Isis's question but continued speaking to himself. On the western side of the Great Xia, although only the West Queen Mother is stationed, there are still some humans within the Great Xia who possess the power to resist the gods. I believe you have already witnessed this 2 years ago. Breaking into the Great Xia, slaughtering the populace. Time is short and the casualties would be too small. I have a method that can directly destroy the foundation of the Great Xia, causing casualties in the hundreds of millions, and even make the Great Xia gods pay a bloody price. Loki weighed the eternal spear in his hand, his eyes flashing with a dangerous light. You know, about the national guardian divine steel of the Great Xia? Pamir Plateau. Outside the Kashi Border Defense Company. In the desolate snowfield, rows of new recruits stood in neat formation. Lin Chia stood before them with the members of the Nightfall team standing in equally orderly lines behind him. Lin Chia's gaze swept across their faces. Most of these new recruits looked dejected, their faces filled with frustration and gloom, while only a small portion stood tall, their eyes bright like stars. This assessment system had directly eliminated over 400 new recruits. According to the arrangements made before the assessment, their qualifications to become night watchmen had been completely revoked by Lin Chia. Those who stood upright and exuded vitality were mostly the new recruits who had passed the 7-day assessment and successfully ascended Mount Conger. I know you have doubts about this assessment. Lin Chia spoke slowly. Before we begin the summary of this final assessment, does anyone remember the question I asked you before the assessment started? Upon hearing this, the new recruits present were momentarily taken aback, but soon someone reacted and spoke up. Report. Speak. Before the assessment began, you asked, if our abilities are insufficient to bear the responsibility of guarding the Great Xia, then why step onto the battlefield? Lin Chia nodded slightly, his gaze sweeping over the new recruits before him. Now, does anyone have an answer to this question? The new recruits raised their heads slightly. Among those eliminated to the Border Defense Company, some opened their mouths as if to say something, but their eyes revealed a hint of confusion. After a moment they lowered their heads and fell silent. Suja stood among the eliminated new recruits, and upon hearing this question his heart skipped a beat. For some reason he suddenly thought of Ku Chonglin from that day, sitting there, slamming the table, pointing outside the Border Defense Company and saying, "What will happen to my family if the border is breached?" In his mind he recalled the border guards who had stood on the borderline with heavy military coats and rifles, eating cold meals and sleeping on hard wooden beds, yet standing firm in the cold wind, supporting the entire country's border with their straight backs. He also remembered not long ago, the countless souls who rushed toward the National Guardian Monument for the sake of the Great Xia. For some reason in Suja's eyes, the soldiers guarding the border and the figures of the Great Xia rushing toward the National Guardian Monument seemed to overlap little by little. Suja suddenly raised his head, his eyes shining with unprecedented clarity. Report. Lin Chia's eyes lit up. He turned to look at Suja and calmly said, "Speak." Taking a deep breath, Suja shouted, I don't know if what I'm saying is right, but I feel that, if our abilities are insufficient to bear the responsibility of guarding the Great Xia, and we don't go to the battlefield, then we are unworthy of being night watchmen. Then there would be no one in this world worthy of being a night watchman. Hearing this, the new recruits were all stunned in place. Lin Chia narrowed his eyes slightly. Seeing the entire venue fall silent, Suja swallowed hard and gathered his courage to continue. Guarding the Great Xia is not something that can be measured by whether one's abilities are sufficient. Not just us, even Instructor Lin, even commanders would, even the gods would not dare to say they have the absolute ability to protect this country. Otherwise, the casualty rate of night watchmen wouldn't be so high, and the gods of the Great Xia wouldn't have sacrificed themselves to protect the people of the Great Xia by turning into monuments. Suja raised his hand, pointing to the Border Defense Company behind him. These border guards are just ordinary people, yet they can still carry guns to guard the Great Xia's borders. If true disaster strikes, they wouldn't be able to stop it at all. But they still came. The weak have their own ways of guarding and the strong have their own ways of guarding. Guarding the Great Xia does not require absolute power capable of doing everything, but rather the determination to stand before thousands in the face of disaster. Suja's words were powerful. After he finished speaking, the new recruits standing beside him, also eliminated to the Border Defense Company, gradually lost their confusion, and their eyes became increasingly bright. A look of approval appeared in Lin Chia's eyes. Very good. His gaze fell on the many new recruits as he slowly spoke. What Suja said is very good. Not everyone possesses extraordinary talent, nor does everyone have strong abilities. What is needed to become a night watchman is not these. This is also why I set up the elimination mechanism for the assessment. Those with talent and ability need to constantly climb to new heights, challenge their limits, and stand at a higher place to protect all beings. Those with relatively weaker talents are not without their uses. In fact, from a certain perspective, you are even more important than those with talent because you are the foundation of guarding the Great Xia. It seems that many of you have already learned something from this training. Lin Chia spoke slowly. I have taught you everything I needed to teach. Although the assessment has ended, I will give you another opportunity. Everyone close your eyes. Upon hearing this command, the many new recruits were momentarily taken aback. But after a moment they obediently closed their eyes. Lin Chia's gaze swept over everyone as he calmly spoke. Those willing to become night watchmen and take on the responsibilities of night watchmen from now on, raise your hands. The new recruits below raised their hands one after another. Looking around, almost all the new recruits had their hands raised, with only a few hesitating for a moment before not raising their arms. Lin Chia lowered his head and crossed out a few names on the list with a pen. Put your hands down, open your eyes. Lin Chia turned the list behind him and continued, everyone pack your things and prepare to return to the capital. Those who just raised their hands can start preparing for the swearing-in ceremony. But wasn't our qualification to become night watchman revoked? Someone among the new recruits asked cautiously. Temporarily revoked does not mean completely stripped away. Lin Chia smiled slightly. Now I am giving it back to you. As soon as he finished speaking, Lin Chia turned and left, with the members of the Nightfall team following behind. After a brief silence, the new recruits behind erupted into thunderous cheers. This assessment can be considered a complete success. Chao Yuan glanced at the excited new recruits behind him and smiled. Finally, we can go back. I've been so busy these past 2 days that I haven't had a good sleep. Who will lead the new recruits in the swearing-in ceremony when we return? Is there any doubt? Of course it's Chiye. Hee, I can do it too. It's quite impressive. 6 figures draped in deep red cloaks walked away amid the laughter and cheers of the new recruits. Not long after, military trucks roared across the wasteland and slowly came to a stop at the entrance of the Border Defense Company. Since they hadn't brought any luggage, the new recruits simply had a quick meal in the company cafeteria to replenish their energy. Afterward, they orderly boarded the trucks. Compared to when they arrived, they now looked disheveled and dirty like wild men, but their eyes were filled with uncontainable joy. Lin Chia sat in the back of one of the trucks, looking around at the excited new recruits, a faint smile always playing at the corners of his mouth. The nearest military airport to the Kiyoshi Border Defense Company was still quite a distance away. Even by truck it would take several hours. With too many new recruits and not enough trucks available for the night watchman at the border, the instructors had to squeeze into the trucks with the recruits. To prevent any unexpected situations, they sat in different trucks to ensure the recruits' safety. At first, as they left the Border Defense Company, the new recruits were just excitedly chatting in the truck. But as time passed, their interest gradually shifted to Lin Chia, who was in the cabin with them. Having passed the assessment, the recruits looked at Lin Chia as if he were a teacher they had just graduated from school, their eyes no longer filled with fear but rather with closeness and curiosity. Under the gaze of so many eager eyes, Lin Chia's expression gradually became strange. Instructor Lin. A recruit leaned closer to Lin Chia, blinking. I heard that you killed a Japanese god in Takamagara. Can you tell us about it? Upon hearing this, the eyes of everyone present immediately lit up, and they crowded around Lin Chia. Yes, Instructor Lin, please tell us. Instructor Lin, which god did you kill? Was it powerful? Instructor, what is the human circle in Japan like? Instructor Bailey said, you used to be a gigolo in the human circle. Is that true? Lin Chia's mouth twitched slightly. He looked at the eager recruits in front of him, smiled helplessly, and an affectionate expression unconsciously appeared on his face. These were all soldiers he had brought out. All right, then I'll briefly tell you about it. Lin Chia straightened up slightly, and upon hearing this, the other recruits' faces lit up with joy, and they immediately quieted down. First, I want to clarify that the rumor about Instructor Bailey saying I was a gigolo is purely false. Lin Chia said seriously, the human circle in Japan is vast, and the forces within it are complex, such as the Oracle Envoy and the Master of the Katsu Blade. The recruits in the truck all gathered around Lin Chia, their bodies swaying with the bumps of the vehicle. They looked at him eagerly, like a group of children sitting around a campfire, listening to a veteran returning from the front lines recount stories of the past. The vehicle slowly drove up a rugged road, and as the altitude increased, the recruits could clearly see the entire border landscape from the truck. Gray mist churned beyond the borderline, and behind it, a border defense company stood like a nail, deeply embedded in the wasteland. Thick snow clouds piled up in the sky, completely blocking the bright midday sunlight, and a rare and terrifying blizzard was silently brewing. Boom, boom, boom. Just as the recruits in the truck were engrossed in Lin Chia's story, several thunderous explosions erupted from beyond the borderline. The thunder startled the recruits, and Lin Chia's voice abruptly stopped. He frowned, braced himself against the edge of the truck, jumped down and simultaneously opened the radio, speaking to all military trucks. "Stop all vehicles." On the mountainside, dozens of trucks slowly came to a halt. Lin Chia and the others got out of the trucks and turned to look in the direction of the thunder, their pupils suddenly constricting. Under the dim, lightless snow clouds, grayish-white mist swirled like seawater filling the sky, wildly churning outside the invisible wall of divine miracles. Outside the wall of divine miracles, 8 tall and mysterious figures floated between the sky and the earth, slowly emerging from the chaotic mist, crossing the wall of divine miracles, and stepping into the territory of the Great Xia. These were 8 strangely dressed foreign beings, their bodies covered in scars, but their eyes contained endless hatred and ferocity, like a pack of wolves charging into a flock of sheep. The moment they appeared, a terrifying pressure filled the entire world. Even from over 10 kilometers away on the snowy peak, they were not free from the range of their pressure. Over 600 new recruits swayed simultaneously, their legs going weak as they nearly fell to the ground, their faces pale as they stared at the 8 figures at the border, fear unlike anything they had ever experienced filling their eyes. Having yet to step onto the battlefield, this was their first time sensing such a despairing and powerful pressure. Lin Chia stood in place, staring at those figures, his expression visibly darkening. Gods. 8 Egyptian gods. But shouldn't the Sun City of Egypt be fighting against the heavenly court right now? How did these gods escape? The 8 Egyptian gods hovered in the air as if sensing something. They turned their heads and looked toward a certain void not far away, their divine power surging instantly, a chilling, killing intent sweeping out. Lin Chia followed their gaze and was first taken aback. Then his heart skipped a beat, his eyes filled with horror. Their target was the National Guardian Divine Steel. At the edge of the mist, Loki's information was correct. The wind god Xiao gazed at the void where the National Guardian Divine Steel was located. As long as we get close to this side of the border, we can clearly sense the presence of that steel. As long as we destroy it, the invisible wall protecting the Great Xia border will be breached by 1/9, allowing the mist to flood in, bringing devastation to the people of Great Xia. Moreover, it won't be easy for the Great Xia gods to repair this gap. The gods of Great Xia want to destroy my Egyptian divine kingdom, so I will slaughter their mortal citizens. Without such a source of faith, what difference is there between the heavenly court and other divine kingdoms? The 8 Egyptian gods immediately turned around and rushed toward the National Guardian Divine Steel hidden in the void. At that moment, the ground beneath them suddenly shook and snowflakes erupted into the sky. A beautiful woman draped in a golden and purple-patterned divine robe stepped out from the void, holding the Kunlun mirror, blocking the path of the 8 Egyptian gods. The gaze of the West Queen Mother swept over them, her brows slightly furrowing. The Sun City's minions, not dying within the city, dare to covet my Great Xia National Guardian Divine Steel? With a cold snort, the West Queen Mother unleashed a surge of green divine power, and the ancient bronze mirror in her hand shot up into the sky, instantly enveloping the 8 Egyptian gods above. Without reaching the pinnacle, how can you alone stop us? The sky god Nut spoke coldly, extending his hand upward and grasping as if the dim and dark sky had collapsed, heavily crashing down onto the surface of the suspended Kunlun mirror, causing it to rumble. As the sky shook, the thick snow clouds rolled up, and the swirling blizzard poured down from the clouds. In the next moment, a hurricane erupted from the void, creating an unprecedented snowstorm across the desolate snowfield. With Nut and Xiao taking action, several other deities also summoned their divine powers to strike the Kunlun mirror in the sky. Under the combined assault of the 8 deities, a corner of the mirror covering the sky was forcibly lifted. The Queen Mother of the West's face turned pale, her brows furrowing tighter. Her golden and purple patterned divine robe whipped wildly in the wind and snow as she transformed into a long rainbow, directly engaging with the many Egyptian deities. In an instant, divine power surged, shaking the earth and sky. On the snow-capped peak, the new recruits were utterly shocked by the divine battle unfolding at the horizon, their hearts trembling with each clash of divine power, their faces extremely pale. "This is bad," Lin Chia murmured to himself. Lin Chia knew very well that even with the Kunlun mirror in hand, the Queen Mother of the West could not possibly contend with the 8 Egyptian deities. Even the new recruits present could see that. No matter how forcefully the Queen Mother of the West tried to stop the 8 Egyptian gods, she could at most hold them off for less than 10 breaths. But now, all the gods of the Great Xia had already emerged, and even if the Queen Mother of the West exerted all her strength to buy time, there was no way any deity could come to her aid. Although there were human powerhouses stationed within the Great Xia, they could not arrive in such a short time. Lin Chia shifted his gaze away from the divine battle in the sky, focusing on the void where the national guardian divine steel was located. The image of the Great Xia gods like moths to a flame, sacrificing themselves to become the steel flashed in his mind. The Queen Mother of the West, the Jade Ding real person, the Emperor of Fengdu Yangjian. That steel was the guardian of the Great Xia's borders, a divine monument that countless Great Xia gods had exchanged their cultivation and lives for 100 years ago. Behind the national guardian divine steel was the Kashi border defense line, and beyond that was the myriad lights of the Great Xia. No matter what, this divine steel must not be broken. Lin Chia's gaze fixed firmly on the Egyptian deities, his fists clenched uncontrollably, a resolute look appearing in his eyes. He activated the radio, shouting, "Chao Yuan Qin Yu. You too come with me." A massive cloud energy quickly gathered beneath his feet, lifting his body and connecting him with Chao Yuan and Qinyu, who were rushing over not far away. Before the many new recruits could react, 3 deep red figures had already soared on the Nimbus cloud, rapidly heading toward the National Guardian Divine Steel. What is Instructor Lin trying to do? I don't know. He rushed to the National Guardian Divine Steel. Are those gods targets the National Guardian Divine Steel of our Great Xia? Are Instructor Lin and the others going to guard the steel? But those are gods. So many gods. Can the instructors hold them off? Did you forget what the instructor just taught us? Even if we can't hold it, we must still guard it. A new recruit fell silent for a moment. Because that is the duty of the night watchman. Boom. A deafening explosion echoed from the sky. The Queen Mother of the West's face turned pale, her figure sliding back like a wild goose for hundreds of meters. The Kunlun mirror, suspended in the sky, trembled violently before finally rolling back into the Queen Mother of the West's hands. She can't hold on much longer. You all hold her off. The wind god Xiao's eyes flashed with a glimmer of brilliance as he seized the opportunity, transforming into a beam of light and instantly breaking through the Queen Mother of the West's blockade, soaring out. Following him, the sky god Nut, the earth god Geb, and the life goddess Isis simultaneously flew out. The Queen Mother of the West's expression darkened as she prepared to intervene, but she was immediately entangled by the 4 8-yuan gods rushing up, leaving her no chance to act. The 4 9-pillar gods, carrying divine might, cut through the howling blizzard like thunder, landing directly on the wasteland. The life goddess Isis squinted, gazing at the void before her. With a delicate lift of her jade finger, countless vines emerged from the snow, climbing along the hidden divine steel that was invisible to the naked eye. These vines twisted around the steel like water snakes, and under their binding the towering black steel gradually took shape, forced to emerge in the blizzard. The 4 deities stood in the snow, looking up at the magnificent black stone steel, their eyes narrowing with a dangerous glint. So this is the true form of the National Guardian steel. The wind god Xiao sneered, stepping toward the black steel. Just then they seemed to sense something and looked up at the sky not far away. A flying cloud swept across the horizon, and 3 figures cloaked in deep red fell like cannonballs before the black steel, crashing into the snow and sending a flurry of snowflakes flying. Clay. With a soft hum, the sword box behind Lin Chia exploded, and the Tian Tsong Yun sword shot out, instantly slicing through the vines binding the divine steel at its base, scattering them like fragments in the howling wind and snow. 3 mortals. The earth god Geb scoffed at this scene. These 3 mortals are far weaker than those we encountered before. They dare to stand in our way like this. I heard that Great Xia has a group of mortals who specialize in hunting down strange beasts. What are they called? Night Watchmen? He probably thinks we are one of those strange beasts and wants to stop us. Foolish, laughable. Crush these 3 bugs and quickly destroy this steel. Those annoying guys will be here soon. Just as the 4 9-pillar gods prepared to strike and kill the 3 before them with thunderous force, Lin Chia, standing at the center, took the initiative. Lin Chia gave Qingyu beside him a glance, his figure transforming into a streak of night as he dashed out. He pressed his hand in the void and 5 brilliant magic circles unfolded around him. The magical aura spread out, and a dog in a tailcoat, a gray sparrow, a giant black python, a snow maiden in white and a crimson pencil flew out in succession. As Lin Chia's hand brushed against the Zhan Bai, at his waist, the 6th Klein Realm Void White Bear roared as it landed in the snow. Except for the Weeble that had not yet transformed into a caregiver in the hospital and the pseudo-god Realm Thunder Beast, all of Lin Chia's Klein-level mysteries were summoned. In the raging wind and snow, 6 figures dressed in deep green caregiver uniforms, along with a figure cloaked in deep red, stood tall before the 4 deities. This was the strongest lineup Lin Chia could currently mobilize. Of course, relying solely on these wanting to block the 4 deities was still a pipe dream. Lin Chia took a deep breath, sinking his consciousness into the divine mental hospital in his mind. Before the national monument, Chao Yuan had already placed his right hand on the hilt of the knife at his waist, his eyes filled with a determination to die. As one of the witnesses to the fleeting moments of time, he certainly understood what this stone tablet behind him meant for the Great Xia. He was not surprised that Lin Chia brought them here. Before the other human powerhouses arrived, they had to use every means possible to hold back these 4 deities, even if it meant sacrificing their lives. Although he didn't understand why Lin Chia only brought him and Qingyu, it was no longer the time to ponder such things. Just as Chao Yuan was about to draw his knife, Qingyu turned around and looked at him seriously. "What's wrong?" Chao Yuan asked, puzzled. "With just this we can't possibly stop these deities." Chao Yuan was taken aback. "I know, but what else can we do?" "Chao Yuan, do you trust me?" "Trust." Chao Yuan replied without a moment's hesitation. "Next I'm going to do something very bad," and Qingyu gazed into his eyes. "Forgive me." Before Chao Yuan could react, Qingyu had already grasped the hilt of the straight knife at Chao Yuan's waist, forcefully pulling it out. Clay. A light sound, the knife's ringing was drowned out by the howling wind and snow. Qingyu held onto Chao Yuan's hand, while Chao Yuan gripped the knife. Under Chao Yuan's shocked gaze, Qingyu pointed the blade at Chao Yuan's chest, the edge slicing through his flesh, directly stabbing toward his heart. Qingyu's gaze was incredibly calm. Chao Yuan looked at him in confusion. At the moment the blade was about to pierce his heart, he instinctively resisted for a moment, but the next second he relaxed his body, allowing Qingyu's knife to plunge into his heart. A massive pillar of malevolent energy burst forth, shattering the raging snowstorm and shooting into the sky. Amidst the howling wind and snow, 6 Klein-level guardians charged toward the 4 pillar gods simultaneously. A group of strange beasts summoned? Seeing this, the wind god Xiao shook his head. "How long can you hold us off with these things?" He extended his hand, grasping at the 6 approaching guardians from afar, and a twisted gale suddenly arose, crushing all the air within several kilometers ahead with terrifying power. In a critical moment, a white bear from the void embraced Wang Kai, vanishing into the void, while a gray sparrow flapped its wings, transforming into a gray streak that flew several kilometers away in an instant. Only the massive black python and the slower snow woman were instantly crushed into fragments by the gale, turning into remnants that returned to the god's asylum. Seeing 4 mysterious creatures escape, the wind god Xiao's expression darkened. Just as he was about to take action, the ground beneath him suddenly trembled. The 4 pillar gods looked up simultaneously, only to see a pitch-black pillar of malevolent energy shooting into the sky, the snow clouds above gradually swirling into a massive vortex under the impact of the energy pillar. Roar! The flames of malevolence intertwined into a sea of fire, incinerating the falling snowflakes, and a deep roar echoed beneath the sky. At the same time, a black giant shadow slowly rose from the ruins. It was a giant composed entirely of black flames, with circular holes in its arms, shoulders, knees, and chest. Black chains pierced through it from the void as if they were shackles of fate, binding it tightly in place. Upon seeing this towering shadow, the faces of the four pillar gods simultaneously showed confusion. What is that thing? I don't know, it seems to have come out of that red-clothed mortal. I've never seen such a monster before. Mortal? How could a mortal possess something like that? Its aura is not weaker than ours. It's coming toward us. Don't let it hold you back, split up and break the monument. The four pillar gods flew off in different directions. Just as the earth god Geb was about to bypass the towering shadow, a heavy chain whistled down. Geb's eyes narrowed and he quickly dodged. The black giant lock crashed onto the snowy ground, causing thick snow to rise like two waterfalls, as the lock scraped across the earth, instantly crushing a giant peak into rubble. Geb frowned at the towering shadow before him, realizing he had been targeted. With a cold snort, he unleashed his divine power and charged toward the giant shadow. Pen Spirit, you are my past life, I am your present life. If you hear my call, please draw a circle. A whisper echoed through the wind and snow, and a circular trench quickly formed beneath the feet of the life god Isis, enclosing her within a circle. A strange woman in a white dress suddenly appeared behind her, her hands reaching around her neck, grasping for her eyes. Isis narrowed her eyes, a hint of disdain flashing in them. Just then the scene before her changed. The endless white snow vanished, replaced by a neon-lit dance floor. She saw a pug in a tuxedo twisting its alluring body on a steel pole, even turning its head to throw her a flirtatious glance. A chill ran through Isis's heart. In that critical moment, a white bear, a pug, and a rapidly blurring gray shadow simultaneously charged toward Isis from three different directions. A cold snort echoed from the wind and snow, and in just half a second, Isis broke free from Wong Kai's grasp, lifted her right foot and stomped heavily on the ground. An invisible ripple radiated from her, and in the blink of an eye, the four guardians were crushed into blood-colored dust, scattering in the raging wind, disappearing without a trace. The four Klein-level guardians managed to hold the life god Isis for less than 7 seconds. In those brief 7 seconds, the wind god Xiao and the sky god Nut had already reached the black stone tablet. There, a figure draped in a deep red cloak held a sword in one hand, coldly watching them. Behind him, the phantom of a golden-haired man slowly took shape. Are you sure? Bragi's voice echoed in Lin Chia's ears, his tone unusually serious. A few days ago you just bore the soul of that monkey. Your current soul strength is insufficient to support me. If you do this you might die. I know. Lin Chia gazed at the two before him and slowly spoke. But there are some things I must do. Lin Chia was well aware of what would happen if he bore the souls of two deities consecutively. During the great catastrophe of Tsongnan, he had borne the souls of Nyx and Merlin in a short time, resulting in his soul fracturing. If it weren't for the celestial sovereign personally intervening to stabilize his soul, even if he didn't die, he would have been doomed to become a madman forever. Hearing this, Bragi sighed lightly, stepping forward and merging into Lin Chia's body. On the peak of the mountain, hundreds of new recruits stood in the snow, gazing at the scene in front of the National Guardian Monument, their hearts already in their throats. As they saw the pitch-black pillar of fire shoot up into the sky, the recruits widened their eyes, their faces filled with shock. Look. Instructor Chao Yuan has turned into a giant. Wait. Wasn't Instructor N just engulfed by the flames? He can't be. How could that be possible? That's Instructor N, he won't die so easily. What terrifying malevolence. What on earth is that? The giant that Instructor Chao Yuan transformed into is blocking a deity. My heavens. Is this the true power of the instructors? That's not enough. What about the other three gods? How could Instructor Lin possibly hold off 3 gods by himself? Hey, have you seen Instructor Bai Li? No, he was just here. Hearing the recruits' discussions, Shin Qingzhu withdrew his gaze from the National Guardian monument and looked around, realizing that Bai Li Fadi had indeed disappeared, a look of confusion appearing in his eyes. Amidst the swirling snow, a deep red figure was rushing towards the direction of the National Guardian monument. Bai Li Fadi gritted his teeth, his eyes fixed on the chaotic battlefield in the distance, his expression extremely grave. The seal of the Black King has not yet been broken. At most I can only block one Egyptian god. With the current state of Qi Yi, even if he possesses a sick god, he can only reach the peak of the Klein realm, and it would be very difficult to even hold off one Egyptian god. Is there really no other choice? A deep glimmer flashed in Bai Li Fadi's eyes as he raised his hand and heavily slapped 3 times on his own crown. Bang bang bang. With each slap, a wisp of reincarnation energy surged from within him, and his realm began to soar at an astonishing speed. With the first slap, his mental power erupted like a geyser, instantly rising from the initial stage of Wuliang to the peak of the Wuliang realm. With the second slap, a crisp explosion echoed from within him, and the invisible shackles shattered with a bang, his mental power breaking through barriers and directly elevating to the Klein realm. With the third slap, his mental power surged like a full spring, rising rapidly, pushing towards the peak of the Klein realm. After 3 slaps, Bai Li Fadi's face turned pale and he stumbled, nearly falling to the ground. The reincarnation has not yet reached perfection. I can only elevate to this level. Since that's the case, there's only one last resort left. Bai Li Fadi steadied himself with one hand on the snow, while the other hand reached into his pocket, pulling out a straight knife that fell into his palm. He looked up at the distant battlefield and sighed helplessly. That guy Yuansher, why did he have to stuff this thing in my belly? Taking it out will take some effort. A resolute glint flashed in his eyes as he reversed his grip on the knife handle and suddenly stabbed the blade into his abdomen. A sharp pain shot through him, and Bai Li Fadi let out a muffled groan, bending over in agony and spitting out a mouthful of blood. His right hand gripping the knife handle did not loosen at all. Instead he gripped it tighter, taking a deep breath and slowly cutting open his abdomen. Blood soaked his clothes, dripping onto the snow beneath him, quickly forming a deep red pool. Bai Li Fadi lowered his head, looking at the gaping bloody wound on his abdomen, his pale face showing little emotional fluctuation. He silently raised his left hand and reached into the bloody opening. A few seconds later, a jade rui emitting a faint white light was grasped in his palm. Even though Bai Li Fadi's hands, abdomen and legs were already covered in blood, the surface of the jade rui remained spotless. The moment it was exposed to the air, a mysterious aura flowed out, making anyone who glanced at it feel dizzy. Bai Li Fadi held the jade rui tightly, took out a roll of bandage, quickly wrapped his wound, and then struggled to stand up from the ground. Holding the jade rui, he straightened his back and murmured in a low, obscure tone. Jade radiance shines, golden reflection flows true, forming and containing elegance, enveloping and establishing the divine. As his voice fell, the jade rui in his hand trembled violently, and a white halo spread out, completely engulfing Bai Li Fadi's figure. Amidst the illusory aura, strands of reincarnation power unraveled like peeling silk. Bai Li Fadi's short hair visibly lengthened, his skin smooth as jade. He stood there quietly, his form seemingly unchanged, yet he appeared increasingly tall and imposing. Bai Li Fadi casually pulled out a bamboo stick, twisting his long hair into a hairpin, and with a flick of his deep red cloak, it transformed into a robe radiating a faint red hue. Holding the jade rui, he slowly opened his eyes, streaks of star-like patterns crossing his gaze, deep as the starry sky. Only half a stick of incense. He sighed, shaking his head helplessly. With a wave of the jade rui, the white aura completely concealed his figure, making it impossible to discern his appearance. He flickered and dashed towards the black monument. Before the National Guardian monument, Lin Qiyi held his forehead, beads of sweat the size of beans dripping from his brow, feeling as if his soul was about to be torn apart, suffering immensely. His eyes slowly opened, the left one emitting a faint golden hue, while the right one held a natural light green. 2 distinctly different yet intertwined divine powers radiated from within him. Bragi himself might not have been aware, but Lin Qiyi was very clear that after bearing Bragi's soul, He had gained not only the power of the god of music and poetry but also the power of the god of youth. Bragi and his wife Eden shared a single heart, a dual deity, their souls and divine powers tightly intertwined. Though both were forms of divine power, Bragi and Eden's powers were much gentler than the combined form of Sun Wukong's demon and Buddha. Their powers blended seamlessly and Lin Chiyi felt no rejection. However, the weight of the two divine souls made Lin Chiye's already burdened soul suffer immensely. Bragi had long surpassed 50% in healing progress, but this was still Lin Chiye's first time bearing their souls, perhaps also the last. Lin Chiyi forced himself to gather his spirit and recited aloud. The golden tiger city stands, the copper dragon sword belt anew. The rock-solid mountains are firm, the spiritual source flows long. After 1,000 trials and tribulations, still strong, let the winds from east, west, south and north blow. As he recited the 3 verses, towering steel walls hundreds of feet high materialized from the void before Lin Chiyi, surrounding the 2 Egyptian deities like an impregnable fortress, trapping them firmly within the walls. Ridiculous. The wind god Xiao stood behind the wall, a look of disdain flickering in his eyes. He raised both hands and casually tugged at the towering steel wall in front of him. Sizzle. A sharp, fierce wind surged forth like a tide, tearing at the surface of the steel city wall. Amidst the painful buzzing sound, a distorted gap with a radius of 100 meters was blasted into the massive wall. Lin Chiye's gaze sharpened. He had only just stepped into the Klein realm a few days ago. Even with the souls of Bragi and Eden within him, he could only elevate his realm to the peak of Klein. Facing 2 deities was still beyond his capability. Although Bragi and Eden were not particularly skilled in offense, Lin Chiye had no choice but to rely on them. Now in the mental hospital only Bragi, Sun Wukong and Gilgamesh remained. Sun Wukong's soul had just been used, and Gilgamesh's healing progress had not yet reached 50%. Bragi was his only option. Lin Chiye gritted his teeth and quickly raised his hands, as if cradling an invisible zither in front of his chest, ready to pluck its strings. Just then a figure silently appeared behind him. Lin Chiye's pupils constricted suddenly. He spun around rapidly but he was still slower than the deity. He saw the sky god Nut expressionlessly raise a finger and gently tap Lin Chiye on the back. Puff. The right half of Lin Chiye's body exploded into a mist of blood. The deep red cloak was torn into shreds and crimson blood splattered onto the pure white snow. With a muffled thud, Lin Chiye, now reduced to half a body, helplessly collapsed into the snow. The sky god Nut glanced at Lin Chiye's corpse as if looking at a pile of garbage. He withdrew his gaze and slowly turned his head, standing beneath the divine monument alongside the wind god Xiao. 2 powerful and terrifying waves of divine power surged into the sky. Xiao raised his palm about to grasp the black stone tablet, when a flash of green light whizzed past. The green light brushed against Xiao's wrist and the next moment his entire hand fell lightly to the snow, blood gushing forth. As the severed hand hit the ground, a strand of transparent Dao fire ignited from the void, instantly turning it to ashes. Xiao was momentarily stunned, then snapped back to reality, enduring the excruciating pain as he turned sharply to look in the direction from which the green light had come. He saw a figure enveloped in a white halo stepping through the air. The raging snowstorm swirled around him, yet not a single snowflake could land on him. From the faint Dao hairpin and Dao robe, he appeared to be a Daoist, but his form and features were completely indistinguishable. Perhaps it was due to witnessing the destruction of the Sun City by the primordial heavenly venerable, but when the wind god Xiao and the sky god Nut saw this Daoist's attire, their hearts skipped a beat and a wave of fear surged within them. Is it the great summer venerable? No, it's not the venerable. His aura is very weak, far from that of a venerable. Nut carefully sensed the divine power on the Daoist and let out a slight sigh of relief. The wind god Xiao looked down at his severed hand, his expression extremely grim. Another monster that popped up from who knows where. We can't let him hold us back. We need to finish this quickly. As soon as he finished speaking, both of them charged toward the Daoist hidden within the white halo. Streams of fierce wind coalesced around the wind god Xiao, breaking through the howling blizzard at an astonishing speed, and in the blink of an eye, they appeared before the throat of Bai Li Pang Pang. Bai Li Pang Pang narrowed his eyes, his left hand forming a Taoist seal while his right hand waved the jade rui lightly. The fierce winds, upon touching the white halo, seemed to dissolve and vanish instantly. At the same time he stepped forward with his right foot, and transparent Tao fire ignited from the void, engulfing the two deities within. The surging divine power surged amidst the Tao fire, and a jade hand broke through the edge of the flames. The sky god Nut stepped out from the fire, her gauzy dress showing no signs of burning, but when she looked down at her hands her brows furrowed tightly. The wind god Xiao followed closely behind her. "Can these flames burn divine power?" Xiao spoke with a grave expression. "And that white light surrounding him seems to dissolve my fierce winds. Nut, I'll leave him to you." The sky god Nut snorted coldly, her arms slightly spreading as her gauzy dress floated up. A mysterious aura of law emanated from her. At the same time the wind god Xiao turned around, preparing to strike at the divine monument again. Bai Li Pang frowned, his left hand's Tao seal suddenly changing, and a faint light flashed across his red Tao robe. "Reverse the universe." As soon as he spoke, Nut and Xiao felt a blur before their eyes, as if the world had suddenly turned upside down, the space twisting. By the time they regained their senses, they found themselves standing on a snowfield engulfed in black malevolent flames. Roar, roar, roar. A furious roar echoed from the sky as a black chain suddenly broke through the snowstorm, crashing down toward the two of them. Xiao and Nut's expressions changed drastically and they quickly dodged. After a tremor that shook the earth, they stabilized themselves in mid-air and looked back. They had somehow moved several kilometers back from where they should have been standing beneath the divine monument, now positioned on the battlefield of the earth god Gab and the towering giant. The Taoist, enveloped in a halo, stepped through the air to the side of the Black King. The Tao halo flowed, malevolent energy surged, and the white and black figures stood like an insurmountable wall before the three nine-pillar gods. Bai Li Pang seemed to sense something, turning slightly to look beneath the divine monument. Chia, the goddess of life, Isis, draped in a green cloak, withdrew her gaze from the two figures, one black and one white, and turned toward the National Guardian monument. The current situation was somewhat unexpected for her. The mortals comparable to deities from Great Summer had yet to arrive, and the Great Summer gods had not pursued them. Logically, the four of them, the nine-pillar gods, should have easily destroyed the National Guardian monument, yet those two monsters that appeared from nowhere had managed to hold them back for so long. They had not concealed their divine might, and those mortals comparable to deities should have already sensed their invasion and would soon arrive. Their time was running out. They had to destroy this monument as quickly as possible. The divine power around Isis rippled as she was about to reach the base of the monument when she seemed to see something, her eyes narrowing slightly. The storm carried snowflakes, producing a low, mournful wail in the air. At the foot of the pitch-black monument stood a bloodied figure, draped in a tattered cloak, quietly standing there. A faint blue light flickered around him. Under the power of the goddess of youth, his missing half of the body had already healed significantly, and flesh was rapidly spreading over the gray-white bones. His right hand's fingers had not fully regrown, and the pale bone joints, still attached to a few strands of flesh, were currently gripping a long sword, exuding a chilling, killing intent. "To destroy this monument, you must first kill me. Are you really still alive?" Aces squinted at Lin Chia in front of the National Guardian monument, as if sensing something. "You carry the breath of life and youth." Lin Chia's hand gripping the sword was gradually enveloped by flesh and blood, the tender skin of a newborn tinged with a hint of pink. He endured the excruciating pain in his soul and parted his lips slightly, an ancient and rhythmic Western ballad flowing from his throat. "Scenting the fragrance of blood, I found the Hall of Souls. A scene of ruin. Ghosts sing and frolic. Black rosemary blooms, vines twist and grow. Souls gaze, faith in the blood-red moonlight." As Lin Chia's voice rose, the sky darkened at a visible pace, and the ground beneath their feet suddenly trembled violently. Black vines burst forth from the snow like tentacles, rapidly reaching for Aces, who was draped in a green cloak. A faint red glow fell from the sky and a gray-black wind, seemingly from the underworld, swirled around her. Strange, pale faces opened their gaping mouths, viciously biting toward her body. Aces's narrowed eyes showed no sign of emotional fluctuation. She raised her fingertips slightly, and small seedlings broke through the earth beneath her feet, instantly covering the surface of those black vines, greedily absorbing their nutrients and spiritual energy. In just a few seconds, those vines cracked and shattered, and with a casual wave of her hand, the remnants of the ghostly wind were scattered into pieces by a vibrant spring breeze. Scenting the fragrance of blood, I found the Hall of Souls. In the distance, a statue lies, its severed arm hidden aside. That is the goddess's delirium, pointing the way with her middle finger. Red flowers bloom beside her, that is paradise. Before Aces could make another move, Lin Chia's voice rang out again. Boom. Aces's eyes narrowed, and her figure instantly vanished from her original spot. A dull thud echoed as a massive blood-red statue of a goddess materialized from the void, crashing heavily into the place where she had stood. Snowflakes danced in the air as the statue loomed over Aces in the snow, its thick right arm raised, fingers seemingly grasping the entire sky, pressing down toward Aces's head. Endless. A trace of anger flickered in Aces's eyes. From beneath her green cloak, a jade-like hand emerged, colliding with the palm of the blood-red statue. At the moment their hands met, green-tinged cracks instantly spread across the surface of the statue. Aces's fingers dug in deeply, directly crushing the statue's right arm, the terrifying life force obliterating the entire statue into fragments. Lin Chia let out a muffled groan, a trickle of blood flowing from his nostrils as he bent over in pain. He took a deep breath, opened his mouth and was about to utter something when a hand clamped around his throat, slamming him down into the snow. Centered on his back, a massive pit with a radius of 100 meters erupted with a thunderous roar. Thick clouds of dust mixed with flying snow fell, and Aces in her green cloak held Lin Chia's throat with one hand, pinning him in the center of the pit. Blood flowed from Lin Chia's 7 orifices, gradually staining the surrounding ground. I understand now, you want to use the youthful divine power within you, risking everything to hold me back until reinforcements arrive. Aces coldly regarded Lin Chia's bloodied face. Unfortunately, you are too weak. Even the resilience of a cockroach cannot delay the steps of a deity. As Aces's words fell, seedlings burst forth from the earth beneath her, climbing up Lin Chia's right arm and rapidly spreading across his body like a green tide. As these seedlings grew, Lin Chia's body felt as if it had turned into soil, firmly anchored to the ground, unable to move an inch. He stared intently into Aces's eyes, but his vision was gradually obscured by the seedlings. Aces slowly withdrew her hand, standing up from the pit. She cast one last glance at the lush green ground, turned, and walked toward the National Guardian Monument. As she raised her hands, the seedlings rapidly climbed up the base of the monument, growing out from the seamless surface of the stone, greedily absorbing the energy within, multiplying and thickening. A hint of green slowly devoured the surface of the black stone tablet. What terrifying divine power! Aces frowned slightly. This thing cannot be easily broken by an ordinary deity. No, even a supreme god would find it difficult to destroy it. But fortunately my life force can gradually consume its power. Once the divine energy is absorbed by the plants, it will weaken significantly. As Aces murmured to herself, the figure submerged in the pit, engulfed by the seedlings, slowly clenched its fists. Lin Chia could clearly sense that his strength and vitality were being drained bit by these seedlings. If he hadn't carried Eden's soul and possessed a large amount of youthful power within him, he would have likely been drained into a dried corpse by now. Yet even so, as these seedlings grew rapidly, Lin Chia felt his body becoming heavier and heavier, as if they were nails firmly pinning him to the ground. With the loss of a significant amount of spiritual energy, his consciousness began to blur rapidly. At that moment, Aces's words, transmitted through spiritual perception, entered his mind. He suddenly widened his eyes, his awareness briefly returning to clarity. No, he absolutely could not just wait to die here. If Aces drained the power from the monument, it would all be over. A trace of determination flashed in Lin Chia's eyes. He struggled to open his lips, whispering in a voice only he could hear, hoarse and soft. Wildfire cannot be extinguished. Spring breeze blows again. Boom. A fierce blaze erupted, engulfing the seedlings that bound him, along with Lin Chia's very being, into its fiery embrace. As Lin Chia's realm was elevated to the peak of Klein, The effect of the sky's bard multiplied several times, and the power of this flame was no longer comparable to ordinary mortal fire. Under the scorching flames, the green seedlings gradually withered and died, and Lin Chia's body was also on the brink of death. These seedlings had all rooted in Lin Chia's flesh, meaning that to completely burn them to death, Lin Chia had to let the flames consume his own body as well. As the fire grew stronger, Lin Chia's body was rapidly carbonized. Once the seedlings were completely burned away, the pit fell into a deep silence again. After an unknown amount of time, a figure, charred and bloodied, slowly crawled out from the bottom of the pit. At this moment Lin Chia was unrecognizable. Not only had his clothes been burned to ashes, but his entire body was devoid of any intact skin. If it weren't for the cleansing of the power of faith and having consumed the peach of immortality, he would have died countless times by now. This charred figure weakly straightened its body, and just then something slid down from its chest, landing on the pure white snow. He looked down and was momentarily stunned. It was a shining emblem,